Hi, welcome to Hey It Gets Better. I'm your host, Katie Watson. Today I'm joined by Julio Taylor. Julio is a former musician who is now the CEO of Hallam, a digital marketing agency that is based in Nottingham. In today's episode, we discuss a range of things from the importance of doing what you love to the practicalities of doing that. We also discuss finding your super goal. Recording this episode with Julio has given me so much motivation to do stuff in my own life. So I hope you enjoy it and take away what you can from it. Enjoy! Hi, Julio. Thank you for coming on Hey It Gets Better. If you'd just like to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a bit about what you do and who you are.
Hi. I'm Julio, and I am currently the CEO of Hallam, which is a digital agency in Nottingham. And what I do is I'm responsible for leading the agency and specifically focus on strategic direction of the company, innovation, product development, and so on. But I do have a background in design and creative, which is where I came from before stepping into my new job.
Yes, congratulations on your promotion. I saw it the other day.
Thank you.
And I think what's really interesting is 20 years ago, I didn't want to say too high of a number.
Yeah, about 20 years ago.
Did you know did you have any idea that this is where you would be?
No, definitely not. I mean, 20 years ago, I don't think I could have even believed that somebody would pay me money to work online. It's probably an alien concept to younger people, but in the year 2000, the internet was really very early, very young. There was very little industry around it. There was very little work involving, internet or websites or anything like that. So I think the jobs that we do today, frankly, they didn't exist. So it would have been very difficult to predict the path that we'd take.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's still the same now where we don't know what jobs are going to exist in 20 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say actually that in your position in 20 years' time, I think it's even less certain because I think the pace of change and the acceleration of technology is gonna bring a massive shift in what type of work that'll be in the future. There's no question about that.
Definitely. And so we know, so the listeners know what you do now, but you didn't always start out in design, and because you do have a past in music, don't you?
Yeah, I do. So my dream as a kid was changing all the time. That happens, I guess, to everyone. Like I wanted to be one thing, be another thing, and the thing that I discovered when I was about 15, 16 was that I wanted to play music. So I decided to go all in and do that. I went to university, but I didn't really like it much, to be honest. I passed and I got through it, but I wasn't particularly bothered about what I studied. Um, and I chose to go into music, and I was in a band for the best part of 10 years. We formed just before 9/11. So that didn't, we did that for the best part of 10 years, but that was my job really at the time. And then I made the decision to move into online, into digital, and which is something I'd always been good at. It was something I'd always liked. And 10 years later, here we are.
Yeah, I just thought of the band thing because I saw the other day, I think it was on LinkedIn, someone had posted a
Hmm.
photo of you guys at Download Festival.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't think I'd realized how kind of big you guys were, and I was like, that is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was really good. I wouldn't say we were big, famous as such. It was good. We did well. But it's very difficult to make a living in the music business when there is no market for it. No one buys music anymore. It's powered by, in my opinion, an unsustainable model of advertising in which musicians become paid to advertise rather than for their craft, which I think is unsustainable. And I think at some point that's going to have to change. We, at some point, we kind of run out of steam, and it happens to some bands, I guess.
I know like a lot of people, they have this debate in their head where should they go down the more secure like route, or should they pursue their passion if it is creative? Because even with art, the art industry, that is quite difficult as well. Do you look back and do you think, oh, why did I do that? Or do you look back and are you glad you did it?
No, definitely not. I'm 100% glad I did it. You should always do what you love. And frankly, my when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, growing up, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do as for a job. I didn't really know. I liked music, but I didn't really seriously think that was going to be necessarily guaranteed. Um, I made myself a promise, which was I will not be a shitty old man regretting the things I didn't do. That was my promise to myself. And you need to do what you love, because if you do what you love, it's not a job, right? And it doesn't really matter what it is that you end up doing. But you can be a web designer, you can be a gardener, you can be whatever you love, do it. And then your path will take you into something that does pay, that does give you satisfaction, and you'll discover new things that you never even knew you liked as a result of starting on something you do like. One thing that I also found at the time was, I went to schools where there was a lot of pressure to have a career, get a job, go to university, do this, do that. And no one really asked me what I wanted. Nobody really asked me what I liked. It's more like, here's what you should do. Here's the thing that will pay money. And ultimately, the choice you need to make is, do you want to do something like, I don't know, engineering or whatever, just because it'll give you a wage? Or do you want to do it because you love it? Think about when you're 60, 70, 80, look back and think, I spent 50 years in a company building somebody else's portfolio because it paid me. Or do you want to sit there and think, well, we had an adventure and I did this and I did that, but I learned so much and I wouldn't change it for anything. I know which one I would choose.
It seems so simple when you say it, like do something you love, but it's something that you have to keep reminding yourself to do. And I definitely think there is sometimes a lot of temptation, even pressure to go into like a.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I mean, I can't begin to tell you the amount of terrible jobs that I had, along the way. So I've had temp jobs. Um, I've had manual labor work. I've worked in the hospital in reception at A&E. You can imagine what that was like. I've worked in the pharmacy at the QMC, where I was basically next door to the morgue, and all I saw was bodies being taken in and out all day with no windows. Like, I've done all kinds of terrible jobs to keep my passion alive in terms of music and other things. But at some point, life kind of brings you around to the things that you deserve. And I think if you work and you have a vision and you have a dream and you have faith, you may not find exactly what you thought you wanted, but you'll find something worthwhile along the way. And I think that's the way to, in my opinion, that's the best way to succeed. I think if you have passion, you can achieve most things.
I love how you mentioned your range of terrible jobs because there, it's all well saying pursue your passion, but there's also a practical side of money, and that can cause a lot of stress for people. And I think there is a side where you do have to work quite bad jobs. Hopefully, some people don't have to, but if you can't afford to do both, it can be quite difficult and quite stressful. It's not an easy road.
Yeah, I think everything has a price. I think if you want to do what you love, sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice stability and safety and maybe money. And I think if you do something just for the money, you'll sacrifice your passion and your life and your well-being. And I think you're going to have to choose. And some people are very lucky and they love medicine and they study medicine and they get a job and it's brilliant. And that's what you should do if that's what you like. But I think that's the choice. It's the art of compromise, right? You have to decide which of those things you're willing to give up, if any. I feel like, as a young person, I felt trapped or pressured to succeed, and I was around people who were pressured by their parents to achieve certain things, which I thought was frankly bullshit, and I didn't think that was what I wanted to do, and perhaps I rebelled quite a bit against this, and I did make bad decisions along the way. There's no question, but I think what kept me going all along was the fact that I believed that I could do more, that I could do better, and that still, still keeps me going today.
Yeah, that's one of the themes I found in recording this podcast is everyone's kind of said they've been a bit of a rebel. And I think there's really something in that, in going against the trends and actually doing what you care about.
Yeah, it's really difficult though. I mean, if I don't want anyone to get the impression that that I was privileged. I grew up well. Like my parents gave me a great upbringing, but I left college and university, and I went out into the world, and I got jobs, and I paid my rent, and I lived in terrible houses, and just like everybody else, and the sacrifice that I had to make was to live below the poverty line, frankly, for a long time, so that I could do my music. And I had great experiences, and I wouldn't change that. But somewhere along the way, you change, and that's okay.
Yeah. How did you keep going when you were saying, you lived below the poverty line? Because now like what happened, you have the hindsight. But when you were in the moment, how did you keep yourself motivated?
I kept myself motivated because I believed that what I was doing was worth it. I don't think I could have done that for a job that I didn't like. I did it because it was music, and I loved playing music with my friends, and jumping on a bus or a plane or whatever, and going and doing these things. So I believed in it, and I genuinely loved what we did, and that's why I did it. And likewise, when I started the agency, I sacrificed my income so that I could afford to pay others, and I could afford the rent and all those different things that you can grow a business. To grow a business, you've got to invest, and you've got to sacrifice your own well-being sometimes for the sake of a bigger goal, the bigger picture, which is what I did. So I kept myself going because I believed in the greater goal, and that's why it's important to do what you love, because you've got to believe in something. Otherwise, you're just treading water. You're just aimlessly going through life, not really knowing what you want. And that's why I think if you just go in the general direction of what you like, you'll find your way. I really believe that.
I think that's really inspiring, and especially what you say about going in the general direction, because sometimes you just don't know what you love or what you want, but you know kind of what it is ish. So you want to do something creative.
I think young people, frankly, are. I mean, I sound like a really old man here, and I guess I am now. I'm 41, so I'm pretty old. But young people, in my opinion, are unfairly pressured from the age of 15, 14. You go into secondary education, you start to become siloed into being a certain type of adult before you even experience anything close to what that's going to be like. And you go down a science track, or you become good at maths or good at whatever, and you're effectively sort of pre-assigned to a specific type of future. And secondly, I think the other problem is that simultaneously and conversely, there is a approach of everybody more or less fits into the same box. So for example, I was really bad at school with attention, so I couldn't focus and stuff, and perhaps I would have been the kind of kid that would have been written off as ADHD or something like that at the time. I never was diagnosed with anything, but I'm pretty sure that's what I would have been. I was bad at maths. I was bad at science. I was good at creative. I was good at creativity. But because I was bad at some certain things that were considered to be foundational, my overall prospect was diminished. And I think it can knock your confidence, and you can be set adrift, which is common. So I think young people are put under unrealistic pressure to succeed based on the parameters that others have set, who don't really relate to the reality of growing up, I think. So I think by the time you get to university, you're under so much pressure to be something. And that something is some sort of like mystical figure that I don't think should be prescribed. You know what I mean? So frankly, how you can choose what you're going to be for the rest of your life at the age of 17 is really quite remarkable. You can't, I don't think. So I think that unfair pressure, you should not allow it to limit your ambition and to limit your potential. I don't think you should do that. I think you should believe in that you are good and you have potential, and that you have the ability to do anything if you put your mind to it, but you have to believe in something.
I think it is quite sad because what you say about your experience of education is very similar to how I experienced it, and to how I have a younger sister who's experiencing a similar thing, choosing her A levels, and it hasn't changed. And I think that it's so important that people hear this outside voice that's actually your school, what you get in school and everything they tell you does not necessarily mean that is what you're worth.
No, certainly not. And I think I academically I was not a success at school. I wouldn't consider myself to be, academically inept now, but at school I was certainly an underachiever, big time. I didn't do well. I didn't do my coursework properly. I didn't do my homework properly. I wasn't focused. I didn't believe in it, and I think I was the kind of kid that would have been written off quite quickly, quite easily. Um, I succeeded in the end in what I wanted to do in some ways, but I was most definitely written off along the way, and I don't believe that that should happen to young people. But I think the important thing is, when you get to 21, 22, you graduate from university, I think that's when you really need to take a step back and just think about what is it that you love? Why would you want to go to work in the morning? And actually that became the mantra when I started the agency. We only had one rule, and that was you must love your job when you come to work in the morning. If you love your job, everything else is fine. Everything else you can do, you can fix, you can learn, you can change, but you have to get on the bus in the morning or sit in your car in the morning and think, this is cool. I'm happy to go to work today. And I remember having a job. I can't remember what job it was, one of my terrible jobs along the way. And sitting on the bus thinking, this is shit. Like, I need, one day I will go to work in the morning and be happy about doing it. And you can control that. It's in your hands. You are free to do anything you want, pretty much, in this country. Not everybody has the same opportunities. I think there's a lot of injustice and unfairness, but you can make changes and you can control your destiny. It's not written for you, and you shouldn't allow anyone to dictate it.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to hear. And it is awful how about the amount of injustice in the world and how people have different limitations on their opportunities. And I think that's particularly in regards to the access to education. It's so good to hear and I think every child should be aware of this, that their potential is not limited. They might need help, but it's up to us to help them. But they should not feel like their potential is limited.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think the name of your podcast is really quite apt, because I think it does get better. And let me put it into perspective. So, 20 years ago, when I started out in the industry, Facebook didn't exist, and the founder of Facebook was still at school 20 years ago, and Google was a tiny company with 5 employees at the time, or whatever it was. Apple was almost bankrupt. And most of the technologies that we're using right now, this second, to make this podcast did not exist. And virtually everything that we're using right now has been created by young people who thought that the future would be different and should be different to what they used to do before. And if we're talking about Facebook or podcasts or whatever it is, it's been created by people who had the fire and the passion to believe that there was something better. That is why the future will get better, because it's in your hands. You are the next generation who are gonna move the needle forward. And I think if we were just trying to judge the future based on the past, we'd still be sending tapes to each other and maybe writing letters to each other instead of doing a podcast. So I think the disruptive and the ambitious and the hungry mind of young people should never be tethered. And I think that's why I think this is important, and this is why I was very strong-minded when I was younger about that, but I was very unable to really to think clearly. Nobody ever said to me, you know what, just do what you love, you'll be fine. My dad was very supportive, and he always said to me, do whatever you love. As long as you're happy, I'm happy. That's what he always said to me. But I don't think that truly resonated until years later when I when I finally had a job that I liked and that I created for myself because I was determined enough to start a company.
That's really brilliant, and it's so nice that you had a really supportive dad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he would have at the time would have preferred me to do certain things that were safer, right? That's one of the reasons why younger people are pressured or pushed into safe avenues is because parents want whatever's best for their kids, right? So you kind of want your kids to do something that you know is going to be fine, like be a doctor, be a lawyer or something where they don't really have to worry about the future much. But my rule is if you don't love it, don't do it. You're going to have to compromise. Sometimes you're going to have to do jobs you don't like. That's fine. But as long as you've got a longer objective, you've got a super goal to aim for. I think that's the word that I would use to describe it is what's your super goal, right? What does 30, 40, 50 years old look like? But I'm pretty sure, Katie, whatever job you do when you're 40 doesn't exist today. I'm pretty certain of that. Or at least it won't be recognizable.
I have no idea what I'm going to do when I'm 40. I think as long as I'm happy and I'm creating things, that's what is important to me.
I think the thing that your generation has is you've got access to information that no other generation in history has ever had. At your fingertips, you can get access to anything. You can create content, you can publish it to unlimited numbers of people. That's never happened before. So, that's a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's good because it obviously opens the doors to the world and you can learn anything. But the bad thing I think is that you get overloaded with information and a lot of anxiety is created by you end up believing other people's branded efforts to convince you of what good is. And I'm referring to Instagram and Facebook and these things where people craft these carefully composed versions of the truth that they want you to believe, and you end up being surrounded by it. You become conditioned to it, right? So I think it's a very difficult added pressure that I think older people in my generation and beyond don't understand fully what it's like to be judged by your public brand rather than who you actually are. I think that's a really big thing as well.
How would you give someone advice who is perhaps spending a lot of time that is maybe unnecessary worrying about how they're perceived publicly rather than, enjoying life? What advice would you give to young people?
I think I'm too old to comment on what young people should do, frankly. I can't really advise them what to do, but what I can say is that it's not real. It's not that perception it's in the mind. It's not a real thing. And if you choose to step out of it and delete your account, that's okay. Like it doesn't matter. And if you want to be part of it because you like it, then do that too. It doesn't, but it's not like it's not real, and it's a little bit like, there's always been versions of this, and when I was at school, it would be like your playground groups and your social groups would have been something that defined you, or your, certain things that, would have set you as a certain type of social icon or whatever. When you leave all that behind, you realize actually it doesn't really matter at all. It makes no difference. It's in your mind, and I think what you need to do is think bigger than today. Think about the future. But don't put too much pressure on yourself to try and come up with a master plan for your whole life, because I think that's also kind of unrealistic. But I have to underline, like, if you studied something you love, if you're passionate about archaeology, or you're passionate about, I don't know, like literature, then go and do that. Go and find a job that will do that. And if there isn't a job that does that, then find something in the general direction of that, and you'll find your way.
Yeah, you're definitely not too old to give advice, Julio, because that has just been some cracking advice right there.
Yeah, I don't want to be the old guy that it's like, hey, young people, you got to delete your MySpace account and you'll be fine, or whatever.
And I'd like to talk to you a bit about how now your agency, because you did a career switch really a little bit because you went from music to your agency. That really solidifies this idea that you don't just do one job in your life and it's okay to switch.
I think you're going to have to switch. I think first of all, it is okay to switch. I think if you decide, you know what, I want to be a scuba diver or a dolphin trainer, then go do it. Like, why not? You only live once. Like, When you're 50 or 100 years old and you sit on your porch, thinking, oh, what did I do? Like, don't regret not having done that one thing that you should have done. Like, it's better to have, so it's better to have fucked it up than not to have tried at all, and learn from it. Now, the second thing is I think you will have to change. I think the jobs that you start today, my opinion and I firmly believe this, every job today, unless it's, like a medicine or, something really creative, will be either fully or partially automated in the next 10 to 15 years. So I would say the majority of jobs that you think you're going to do will be either gone or completely different. And additional jobs will be created which don't currently exist. So, for example, if the robots take over, right? Who's going to look after them? Who's going to maintain them? Who's going to code them? Who's going to write words for them? Who's going to, I don't know, record the voices that they use? Like, there's going to be jobs, right? God knows what the jobs will be. Just like the job that I do today didn't exist 20 years ago, and what you're doing now didn't exist 20 years ago. Can you imagine if we'd explained to someone what we're doing right now 20 years ago? They wouldn't even be able to comprehend the concept of it, or even why you would want to do it.
I think it's really good to hear because it's kind of the opposite we hear in education, particularly in my experience. For example, when you pick your A levels, if you don't pick the sciences, that's it. You can never go down that route. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I agree. And what's even stupider about that is that I did do the sciences because I was less bad at it than expected. So, and I didn't like it, and I wasn't good. I wasn't actually good at it, but I ended up doing double science and GCSE and A levels and stuff, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to do it. And in fact, what I should have done is gone to design school and learned design. But at the time, the perception was that the solid, safe bet would have been to do computer science, which is what I ended up studying. A degree that I learned some stuff that was useful, but really isn't what I love. But I think you can do it. That's the thing. Like, it can be done. I've done it, and I had no hope. So uh, you should see my school reports. Julio struggles to concentrate in class, but he's a bright boy and he's got potential. And yeah, that's because I don't like what you're talking about. That's why I don't concentrate.
And now look at you, and you are the CEO of an amazing agency.
I the thing is, I love what I do. There are things about it that I don't enjoy. Of course, like every job, you're gonna have to do things about every job you do. There's gonna be things you don't really like doing, right? It's gonna happen. Even as a musician, like I didn't like loading the gear out of a flipping fire case in the middle of the night. Like I didn't like that either, but you had to do it, right? I think as long as you believe in your super goal, you're gonna be fine.
It's going to be the next big thing. What's your super goal?
I think that's something they should teach at school, right? What's your super goal? Like, what do you love? And like, it should be open ended enough that it could be interpreted along the way. You begin to refine it, you get closer and closer. Like your super goal, Katie, is you want to do something that you create, right? You're creating things, but you could be creating all kinds of stuff. You could be creating like content or video, or you could be creating, I don't know, like you could be creating sweaters or paintings or anything, right? I think a lot of young people are unable to see the big picture, and that's normal because I think you're so focused on the now and trying to survive. Frankly, I think it's not easy, right? There's the pressure of peer pressure, and frankly, I think the older generations do a great job of making things really hard for you guys by making the planet shitter and making everything worse all the time. I think it's hard to believe in anything, right?
Yeah.
But I always have this reassuring feeling that um, everything that will exist in the future will be created by you guys and next generation after you. The future is quite literally in your hands.
I think it's a nice thought.
Yeah,
But it's good because it is easy to get lost in the world we live in because the media, they report so much bad news, and it is very disheartening to think this is the world we live in, where things like climate change have just clearly shown how different the values are and the priorities between the generations. So to think we will be the ones in power soon is quite good.
I agree. I agree. You see young people like Greta Thunberg and so on, and you think, wow, that's amazing. Like, and the empowerment and the amplification of her message through the internet is unbelievable. I think I think that's good. I think that's a real hope for the future that didn't really exist in the 90s and when I was growing up.
Yeah, it's a hope that we have to acknowledge. I'd just like to give you a chance, really, to give any advice to anyone who may feel like they're a bit bogged down right now and they don't know what they're doing with life and they're in one of those kind of having a bad day, month, or year. Almost broke out into like the Friends song there. but but is there anything you want to say to anyone who just feels like that?
Yeah, I think all I want to say is I've been there, and most of us have been there before, and you will find a way. But it's in your hands. Only you can make that change. Only you can make that step. And I think setting out on your journey to start something new or to learn something new or to have the bravery to write a CV and send it. Just now as I was speaking, I was thinking about about 18 years ago, before the band started taking off, I decided that I wanted to be a web designer. And that's when I began freelancing. That's kind of what's planted the seed for me to start the agency. And I remember going online and researching every web agency in Nottingham, all of them. And I sent each one of them a CV with my experience. I had some experience in design, a little bit of experience in web. And I sent my CV with a cover letter to every single one of them saying, please give me a job doing anything. I will do anything. All I want is a chance in the industry so I can progress. And I didn't get a single reply. Not one. Not even a thanks but no thanks. Not even an interview. Not even a piss off. Nothing. And it broke my heart. I was like, I will never succeed. Like, I was just like literally brokenhearted. I was like, this is it. This is the end. I can't even get a T-boy job in an agency. How am I ever going to succeed? And I went on my way and I started the band and I got jobs in a hospital doing admin work and this and that. And then eventually, one of the reasons why I started the agency is because I needed a job. I figured it'd be a brilliant idea if I had a job as a web designer with my own agency, so I could work when I wasn't touring with the band. So it'd be like my stopgap job. And then one thing led to another. It got bigger, it got more successful, and the band fell apart. It all kind of fit together. Some of those agencies that I applied to still exist in Nottingham today, and they're still operating, and I often think, I see the names pop up, and I often think like, how different would it have been if I'd been given that chance, back then, to somebody just gave me a shot. And sometimes you have to create your own serendipity. You have to create your own luck, and creating your own luck means you have to just follow your heart and just do things. And one of the things I did was I just created loads of websites for friends and for family and anything I could do to get more experience. And I volunteered and I did free websites for amateur football clubs, and bit by bit I sharpened my skills. I learned how to deal with rejection. I learned how to pitch myself better, and I did those things. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that no one's ever gonna turn up and give you that shot just like that. It ain't gonna happen. That every musician has that dream that you'll be playing a CD club in London and some record label guy will sit at the back with a beer and watch you and then give you a record contract, right? That's never going to happen. It just doesn't happen like that. And it's the same thing in business, and it's the same thing in your career. You have to create your own serendipity and create your own luck. And I think, those rejections for me I wouldn't necessarily say they were life changing. I think they did rattle me quite a bit. It made me quite sad. And another time I went to I did actually get an interview once for a web design job, and they gave me a technical test. And the reason I failed the technical test was because the test was based on a technology that was outdated, that was so old that I didn't know how to do it because it was before my time. But I couldn't do it. But I could do something better than the test. But the test itself, I couldn't pass, and I didn't get the job. So, I've probably been rejected more times than I have succeeded in anything. But that should never stop you, because ultimately you will overcome and you'll find your way and you'll adapt. And my way of adapting was to maybe I'll just create my own company. If you're not going to hire me, I'll make my own agency. Fine. And, bit by bit, we've built it into something really good. And not building a company is not for everyone. Not everybody wants to do it. I don't believe everybody should do it, because I think it isn't necessarily the right thing for everybody. But there are definitely things that you can do. You can get together with friends. You can start your own ventures. You can volunteer. You can apply for jobs and so on. And the final thing I would say is, I think the most important attributes that you need is attitude. I think if you have a good attitude, a good positive, inquisitive attitude, you will be attractive to employers and you will succeed. If you have attitude, you can learn anything. If you have a good attitude, you can learn anything. I think having experience and degrees and so on without the the positive outlook it will be very difficult for you to succeed. So I think focus on that. Focus on building a good positive outlook on life, a good positive attitude, and have a super goal, something to aim for that you actually want to do, something that you love. The rest will figure itself out.
Thank you, Julio. That was really inspiring, and it was lovely talking to you today. I think you are really an example that it does get better, and it's important to have hope for it. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences today and all your wisdom.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and good luck with your podcast and your venture.
Thank you for listening. I hope you took something away from this today. Please subscribe to Hey It Gets Better wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you could leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that would be amazing. If you want to make sure you never miss a podcast and you want some extra information, you can follow us on Instagram at Hey It Gets Better. I hope you have a fantastic week, and remember, hey, it gets better.